and more particularly institutional investors seeking businesses to be responsible towards the environment and society. The various stakeholders have been showing an increasing interest in understanding how companies manage their environmental and social impacts, as well as how they uphold good governance practices. In this perspective, reporting of companies' performance on social and sustainable related factors has become vital. In fact, as vital, if not less, as reporting on financial and operational performance. Overall, the transition from corporate governance to ESG reporting reflects a broader understanding of the interconnectedness between business operations and environmental challenges. It emphasizes the need for businesses to not only manage risks, but also actively contribute to creating a more sustainable and responsible future. Globally, regulatory bodies have started implementing or enhancing reporting requirements relating to ESG factors. This includes mandatory reporting frameworks or guidelines that encourage companies to disclose their ESG performance. In fact, forward-looking companies have already started integrating ESG considerations into their overall corporate strategy. They recognize that sustainable business practices are not just mere compliance, but also about long-term value creation and risk mitigation. In India, as you all know, the regulatory framework has been laid down by SEBI through LODR regulations, mandating top 1,000 listed companies based on market capitalization to give business responsibility and sustainability report on the environmental, social, and governance disclosures. There is also a requirement of obtaining assurance on BRSR Core, and also, certain companies have to obtain assurance on BRSR Core. The topic is very important, as I said. Our objective of today's webinar is to have a comprehensive understanding of BRSR and BRSR Core. We want to understand the regulatory framework and what is its applicability. The speakers will also discuss the benefits of BRSR reporting and what are the challenges and what are the solutions for this reporting. Friends, we have with us two very distinguished experts to take us through the regulatory framework. We have with us Mr. Ankit Singhi, Head Corporate Affairs and Compliance, Corporate Professionals, who is very well known to us and has been enlightening us on very important and intricate subjects from time to time. We also have with us Ms. Sukriti Kashyap, Senior Associate ESG Reporting and Sustainability Solutions, Corporate Professionals. She is an expert in ESG reporting. It is my, in fact, great privilege to extend a very warm welcome to both our distinguished speakers. Friends, before I invite our speakers to address us, let me inform that our journey of webinars will continue, and we'll be sharing knowledge on a very important topic in our next webinar, that is on 16th of February. The topic will be optimizing employee engagement through aligning appraisals and ESOPs. Now, may I request Ms. Skruti to take us through her presentation. Over to you, Skruti.
Thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity. And this is a great subject. And before I say that it is great, I would like to say that this is the need of the hour and this is relevant. And with 2004 report of United Nations that came up stating whoever cares wins, that was the first time that ESG became the talk of the town. And that report is so comprehensive, so holistic. People from across the industry, people who did not even have active contribution to economy, their views and their footprint was taken into consideration, and it came out that the social and governance factors combined are having an ancillary effect on the environment that needs to be accounted. And there is a very important need for the companies and corporates to realize that uh, it's time that we start introspecting on our actions, and that the disclosures need to start being made on just not the uh, financial aspects, but also the impact that they are creating while they are moving towards their financial goals and aims. So I'll be quickly running you through the presentation. Is the screen available?
Yes, yes.
The background and history of BRSR runs as follows. I mean, well, there have been reports, as I talked about in 2004, a report came. In 2008, there was a BRT committee that sat and spoke about business sustainability. But tangible effects started coming in when in 2011, 9 principles of NGRBC were introduced. Now, what is NGRBC? National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct. So ESG came under the gambit of responsible business conduct. That means that is environment, social governance, all these principles are getting collated. They are getting collated and they are forming some kind of a conduct that needs to get reported in some kind of a form. Then in 2012, so we see how fast the growth started happening in this arena. In 2012, BRR framework came out by SEBI. In 2020, we revamped and called it BRSR as voluntary disclosure for top 100 listed entities. And in 2022, we immediately realized that these cannot be voluntary anymore. And these disclosures have to be mandated for top 1,000 listed entities as per the market capitalization. Why there was need for BRSR reporting? What is BRSR? Business Responsibility on Sustainability Reporting. We are not using the term ESG again, even though in so many nationalities, ESG reports, different kind of frameworks related to certain factors of E, S, or G are coming. But we are using again and again the term responsible conduct, responsibility reporting. So BRSR, again and again, we are saying that this is some kind of responsibility that we need to take. And this is happening only in India, that we are using this term, responsible conduct, in the reporting mechanisms. Okay. So in 2008, when BRT report started coming in, it started creating a butterfly effect into the entire world. All nationalities that contributed actively, or passively to the environment or to the economy were also seen as nationalities that are creating the most amount of impact. Now, when I say impact, I don't just mean financial impact. I also mean impact on the lives of the people and impact on the natural resources. So, stakeholder engagement was one of the key factors that came into the minds of the lawmakers that needs to be taken into consideration. There also was a need that eventually was felt by the nationalities that there needs to be more transparency, accountability in the conduct of all businesses. We also see a very important and very interesting phrase that we all have studied since we were children. With power comes with more responsibility. With power comes with responsibility, and with more power comes more responsibility. So if you're powerful, if you're holding some kind of a power in your hand, then that is a responsibility. And that is something that is that started getting streamlined in the form of reporting mechanisms by different geographies. There was also a need for comparability that was felt by different geographies. And that's why it came in different reports that since we are living in an era of globalization, there is so much of import and export of resources happening. There is interdependency of economic and human resources. There is also a need for uniformity and comparability for these kind of reporting mechanisms. And informed decision making. What is informed decision making? That a decision maker who's sitting at a position where one decision can have a big impact on environment, social, as well as governance factors need to be informed of all the repercussions before they make a decision. And that is what happens inside the boardrooms that we call the governance. So all these things combined were felt as the need of the hour, owing to which the framework started getting settling and different geographies, according to their needs, started adopting these kind of measures, trying to balance economy as well as mindfulness. Let's talk about latest developments now. On 12th of July, on 2023, BRSR Core framework for assurance and ESG disclosure for value chain was introduced. I'm sure by now we all are aware that BRSR framework is out there and companies have already filed their first BRSR report in the last financial year. But on July 2023, a new development came where the decision makers felt the need to include certain more aspects in the disclosures, such as disclosure for the value chain. Now, here it is very interesting. Why are we not using the term supply chain, but we are using the term value chain? We will discuss that in detail about value chain in the following slides, but this is one of the major aspects that was introduced, and also it is creating a lot of confusion in the minds of the people who have to report, of the entities that have to report, even the assurance providers. And how to sail through this is something that we will be discussing in a very short time. From 24 financial year 24 to 25, mandatory value chain disclosures for top 250 entities will be made. 25-26 will have a mandate of giving limited assurance for value chain disclosures. There's a difference between reasonable assurance and limited assurance. So in the last slide, when we discussed that there needs to be a mechanism for comparability, the concept of limited and reasonable assurance has also been derived from the international frameworks. In 2025 and 2026, as the glide path suggests, there will be reasonable assurance for the value chain providers as per the glide path. Well, we have informally discussed the glide path. You can see that this is how it is going to be. And this is not the first time that SEBI has come out with a glide path. One of the interesting things about BRSR reporting that I feel myself while reporting it for the clients, and when I compare it with the international frameworks and especially the Sustainable Development Goals, the GHG protocol, the Kyoto protocol, and other various frameworks that there are, I can very proudly say that these 9 principles have been consolidated in a manner by the Indian government that contains all the elements of environment, social, and governance for the current reporting mechanism. Well, with respect to environment, this is such a beautiful and this is such a wide area that we can take lifetimes of understanding about how intricately and how beautifully nature expresses itself. And no matter how deeply we meander through this subject of science, we will never be able to truly understand how it works apart from just appreciating how it works. So we will obviously be evolving with the different reporting, with the different questions, with the different set of laws maybe. But for the current scenario, I feel that these 9 principles of NGRBC cover most of the aspects that are good enough for any entity to introspect. The first principle would be business should conduct and govern themselves with integrity and in a manner that is ethical, transparent, and accountable. Well, it looks very subjective, but when you go inside the BRSR report, there are certain questions that are that are asked in detail about the conduct of the board and the decision making. Principle 2 consists of businesses should conduct and govern. Businesses should respect and promote the well-being of all employees, including those in their value chains. Businesses not just need to think their employees as a resource, as we have derived from a foreign concept. It's a foreign concept that we've started calling living beings as resources. But if we go into the Indian values and Indian ethos, anything that is alive is seen with dignity, is seen as an individual, and their dignity is well respected. Whether it is for the whether we are having a personal relationship or whether we are having a professional relationship. So when we look at employees, we don't just see them as resources that are here to give us all that they have, with nothing we can do about nothing we can do for them. We should rather see them as individuals and value their contributions, and also our supply chain partners. Businesses should respect the interests of and be responsive to all its stakeholders. It is interesting to understand again that BRSR reporting on the whole does not merely talks about shareholders, but talks about stakeholders. That widens its gambit and makes companies realize that you are definitely answerable to your shareholders. There is no way you can escape that responsibility. But you also have a responsibility to your customers, to your value chain partners, to your neighbors, to your employees, and to anybody who is currently associated with you, and even so that you strengthen your chances of having potential collaborations. Because today, integrity and word are seen as a prize. Businesses should respect and promote human rights. So, under no circumstances should businesses bypass this kind of this aspect. We have come across a lot of fashion houses news. We have come across a lot of news around businesses that have conducted themselves irresponsibly when it came to respecting the rights and dignity of any other human, class, caste, race, or they have conducted themselves in a manner that they have went inside the geography to do any kind of cost cutting. They have exploited the humans because of some kind of an urgent need. We all have come across cases like that. We all have come across business practices like that. But all these practices are taking a different shape today. And we are happy that it's happening. Principle 6 talks about businesses should respect and make efforts to protect and restore the environment. Well, this is paradoxical because we all, whether we believe it or not, are dependent directly or indirectly in active or passive manner on the environmental resources, on the environmental expressions. We cannot live without clean water for a single day. And we cannot live without clean air to breathe for a single minute. So, in order to respect something that we have so much in abundance and we are so much dependent on, businesses cannot think that let me extract the resources but not act responsibly towards them. There always needs to be an effort to give back when we take. Businesses, when engaging in influencing public and regulatory policy, should do so in a manner that is responsible and transparent. Whatever happens inside the boardroom percolates through the social factors and ends up impacting the environmental factors. So we cannot ignore that the righteous decision making is going to be the culture of that company, and that culture will form the basis of that company, and that basis will lead to the ripple effect towards the environmental factors. So ultimately, what happens in the boardroom will be reflected on social and environmental factors. Businesses should promote inclusive growth and equitable development. Businesses cannot think that my growth is important, just the board's growth is important, but nobody else's growth is it's immaterial. An inclusive mindset needs to be developed, and one needs to come out of their own shell. And lastly, businesses should engage with and provide value to their consumers in a responsible manner. Businesses cannot think that they can hide any kind of information, vital information about the product or a service and be able to sell it. And it is important that the life cycle of that particular product or a service is out there, and the consumer or the customer is able to make informed decisions. Well, these were all subjective topics, within these, there are certain questions that need to be answered by all the entities, the top 1,000 listed entities, when we do BRSR reporting. However, we have noticed in this 1.5 years of time frame that there are certain concepts that companies face very challenging while reporting because they don't understand that meaning. So this will be my genuine attempt at making you understand what these concepts mean. And so that next time when you see a BRSR or BRSR core report, nothing intimidates you, and rather you find this journey interesting and you look forward to it. So let's first discuss the environmental factors. There is a policy, there is a there is a question that is asked about sustainable sourcing policy, whether you have a sustainable sourcing policy. A lot of people think, what is a sustainable sourcing? What does that mean? How am I supposed to ascertain whether my products are sustainably sourced? Or what exactly sustainable sourcing is? I come across this question almost on daily basis. So I will not go into the statutory definition of it, and I will explain to you in a very simple manner that through an example that you are a manufacturing unit. You're a brand. You hold a brand and your market is B2C. But you do contract manufacturing. So there are two approaches to it. One approach is that you don't really bother. You only look at the cost cutting and price factors. You choose your contract manufacturers according to that, and you start your operations considering only the pricing factors. And the other approach would be that you make sure that the contract manufacturer that you're entering into contract with has its licenses is in place, does not include itself in any kind of labor malpractices, does not have child labor, does not have is environmentally compliant, is not evading on any kind of compliances, and not just the statutory compliances, but also has some additional factors, such as they themselves look into how the product, when it comes to their factory or their manufacturing facility, is sourced. They can have certifications like SA 8000, ISO 14001 that gives certification on sustainability of the products. So basically, going out of your way to figure out what is best for your product. Giving a good product to your customer is your ultimate goal. And then you disclose that you have done all these things. You have made an effort to sustainably source your product. With eco-mark labeling also, you will be able to exhibit that you are a responsible brand. And not only will it fetch you good customers and good prices, it will also fetch you a good market and brand reputation. Second point would be energy consumption. A lot of entities do have this confusion. What exactly energy consumption would be? What is energy consumption? Energy consumption, to be put simply, is the total electricity, fuel, and other energy consumption from renewable or non-renewable resources. That whatever energy you're consuming to run your organization is your energy consumption, and it can be ascertained through bills. What is energy intensity? This term was also introduced in BRSR, but in 2023 notification, BRSR Core puts light on its reporting, and it's not voluntary anymore to disclose intensity. You have to disclose intensity. Now that we know what energy consumption it is total amount of energy consumed. It's just about the consumption. Intensity means how much energy you are consuming to do a particular task. So energy consumption is measured in joules, and intensity is measured in joules per minute, time, hours, or with joules per time, or joules per rupee. So intensity, whenever we calculate intensity, it is, the unit is always per something. The denominator and numerator are two different entities. Numerator will always be joules, and denominator will change depending upon what factor you are looking it into. Similarly, with water consumption is how much water your entity is consuming. Whether you're a service sector, whether you're a industry, whether you're doing scope 1 emissions, whether you're doing scope 2 emissions, whatever kind of industry you are, you require water either for operations or for your internal consumption. That can also be ascertained through bills. This is calculated in liters, million liters, or kgs. Zero liquid discharge. This is a term that has been introduced in BRSR, in which they're asking, do you have zero liquid discharge policy? So before we understand zero liquid discharge, let's understand in brief what is liquid discharge. Liquid discharge is that liquid that is discharged from an entity, from entity's holes, pit holes, that cannot be reused, managed, or recycled in any form whatsoever. And even after treatment, this is wastewater that has to be released into the environment. So zero liquid discharge policy means that your company is producing this much amount of liquid discharge, and what are you doing to manage it? So basically taking responsibility for any kind of hazardous water that is getting released into the environment. Let's understand what are greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases is a term that everybody is talking about, but it is the most misunderstood term. Everybody sees greenhouse gases as something monstrous, as those kind of gases that cause in harm to the environment, or they are released from, they have a lot of effluent, they have a lot of particulate matter. Well, all of these things are true. We can villainize these gases as much as we want, but this is pure chemistry. Whenever energy gets consumed, energy can neither be created, it can neither be destroyed. Whenever there is a consumption of energy is happening, it has to be released in a form, in some or the other form. It can enter a place in one form, get processed, and it comes out in some or the other form. If we manage it, it's good for us. If we don't manage it, they become greenhouse gases. And those greenhouse gases are then seen as hazardous gases because of their chemical nature, their non-biodegradable nature, and their irresistibility towards making different kind of compounds with either carbon, or they intermix with the natural ambient environment with oxygen and form compounds that harm human life or animal life, general flora and fauna, and interfere with the processes of life of people on this planet. So these greenhouse gases usually come in the form of emissions. When we talk about emissions, emission means anything that gets emitted after a process or during the process. Whenever an activity is happening, as I said, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It changes from one form to another. When we use carbon in some or the other form, it gets mixed with different kind of compounds that it finds in the air or in the ambient environment. And those compounds, when get released in the environment, they get released in the form of emissions. Now let's come to waste management. We also have a question in the BRSR about what the companies are doing with respect to waste management and if there are any initiatives taken by them to promote circular economy, where we also talk about extended producer responsibility. So, unless this question was asked by the top 1,000 listed entities, most of the entities thought that they are not generating any waste. They don't deal with waste management. This was a very common mistake in the understanding of the entities that waste management needs to be done by either waste processing facilities or industries that are into scrap waste management or government that does any kind of collection and management of municipal waste or solid waste or hazardous waste or any kind of waste that gets generated by the entities themselves. But that is not true. If we look into the 2016 Solid Waste Management Act, that very lucidly explains the responsibility of the producer. Waste producer can be anybody. Waste producer can be an entity. Waste producer can be an individual. Waste producer can be a society, a company, a legal person. Whoever comes under the gambit of legal person can be a waste producer. And the moment you're a waste producer, you need to have a waste management policy. So what kind of wastes are there according to the statute? So there is biomedical waste, there is hazardous waste, there is scrap waste, there is e-waste, there is plastic waste, and there is solid waste. And all these wastes, there is dry waste and there is wet waste. And when all these wastes, when they get mixed, the chemistries of all these wastes gets mixed, that leads to the emissions of the greenhouse gases. And those greenhouse gases that then get produced are not just carbon dioxide. That is nitrogen dioxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, nitrogen trifluoride, sulfur hexafluoride. And all these gases, they don't come out individually. They also come out mixed. And that environment is so dangerous for any life to thrive that it becomes difficult, and that it creates a very hostile environment for any kind of life to thrive, and any kind of be it flora, be it fauna, kind of biodiversity around that area can get destroyed. Now let's come to traditional knowledge. There is also a question in BRSR that talks about whether you are doing any kind of activity to preserve the traditional knowledge. What is traditional knowledge? Traditional knowledge is knowledge that is contained by the people of the local areas where your operations are. Oftentimes, we operate in remote areas. For example, if there is a mining industry in, say, Nyamgiri Hills of Maharashtra, we will have direct interaction I won't say conflict, but direct interaction with the gram panchayats that are dealing with the tribals who have some kind of knowledge regarding the herbs of that particular forest, of that particular area. That would be accounted as traditional knowledge. That is contained within a knowledge that is contained within some communities that you come in contact with. So if you are operating in such areas and you come in direct contact with these communities, there is an interaction, and interaction is in some kind of a interdependent manner, then are you taking any measures to protect that traditional knowledge and give those communities that benefit of holding that knowledge for generations? So let's come to life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment is primarily done of products, and this process takes place in the NABL laboratories. These are accredited laboratories that take the sample of that particular product, perform tests as per standards and specifications given by Bureau of Indian Standards, and those specifications then reveal the results, after which we come out with the life cycle assessment of that particular product. Life cycle assessment can also be put in layman terms as shelf life of that product. Well, shelf life also means we usually use the term shelf life for edible products, but now this concept is also getting increased to other products that are coming there in the market, owing to the increase in the customer demand for sustainably sourced products. Okay. Ecologically sensitive areas. Ecologically sensitive areas are those areas that have more than 35% cover of flora and fauna, or some kind of biodiversity is thriving in that area for many, many years. Ecologically sensitive areas is covered in Wildlife Protection Act. It's covered in the Indian Biodiversity Act, in the Ramsar Convention, and it also touches base with the Forest Act, where the act is trying to sensitize various stakeholders about how to behave when you're operating in an area that is predominantly inherited by floral and faunal life. For example, Cherrapunji is a highly ecologically sensitive area because of a particular type of crane, and that is called the black-necked crane, and also the golden frog that there is. So that is defined as an ecologically sensitive area, and to protect those species, the government takes initiatives and does not allow any industrial intervention. And there are so many such ecologically sensitive areas in Himachal, in other areas also, where we allow the biology to flourish and thrive in its most beautiful form. Okay. In the environmental factors, well, there are other jargons also that I would love to explain, but due to perplexity of time, let's come to the social factors, and we have to also cover the governmental factors. So within the social factors, we are having the most talked about word right now that has been introduced by BRSR Core, because the intensity of energy and water is getting calculated in accordance with the purchasing power parity. What is purchasing power parity? It's an economic term, so but it is touching base with the socioeconomics in the context of BRSR core. Exchange rate at which one's nation's currency would be converted into another to purchase the same. The intensity of water and energy consumed by an entity is adjusted by PPP, purchasing power parity, that is, to provide consumption per rupee of turnover in a foreign currency. Now let's understand why BRSR Core has talked about whether an entity needs to have a policy for the differently abled, the specially abled, and if we are having accessibility for them. Also, one of the talks that we should not be speaking things like this is a disability, this is a special kind of an ability, and we can have our thoughts around it. But there are people with a very different ability than the people we usually come across. And that ability should be given power, should be given the fire and the air to be able to live with dignity and to have accessibility to a good livelihood. And if there is a person with extraordinary intelligence, but with a physical disability, to be able to express that intelligence, it somehow becomes the social responsibility of the company, of the entity, to be able to ignite that and tap into that potential and opportunity. And the foremost biggest example of that would be Stephen Hopkins. Let's understand what is disability. Differently abled employees worker as per the right of persons with disabilities act is a person with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which in interaction with barriers hinders his full and effective participation in society equally with others. So any kind of impairment, it could be visual, it could be physical, it could be mental, but there is some different kind of an ability that needs to be tapped into. And companies must have a big heart, must have an open heart, and should give full opportunity to individuals like this to showcase their talent. We never know, we can have a genius. Autistics and dyslexic people have always come out with brilliant ideas and have changed the world. So why not open our hearts and mind towards people with this kind of special abilities and give them an opportunity to make and do wonders for our organization as well. Okay, now let's understand the meaning of key stakeholders. So this one word called key stakeholders is being asked on a regular basis. What is the meaning of key stakeholders? Because every time we are making some kind of a policy or doing some kind of consulting, this term comes out in a very natural way. Key stakeholders would be your vendors, your employees, and anybody who is doing business with you, your customers, your shareholders, the board members, and the potential customers, the customers who used to be there and would like to associate with you again. There's a whole lot of list of the people, especially the people who you potentially can come in touch with, you have been in touch with, and you're currently working with. So these would be your key stakeholders. But right now, when it comes to mapping, let's understand the three key stakeholders would be your vendors, your customers, your clients, and your employees. There is a question on BRSR if we are doing anything, if there is any policy with respect to marginalized and vulnerable groups, well, technically, there is not much of a difference between these two terms, but marginalized and vulnerable groups, the first thing that comes to our mind would be the classified groups that are covered under SC or ST Act. However, the meaning of this entire term is much wider. Orphan children, women who are homeless, or transgenders, people living on the streets, or people who have gone bankrupt and have absolutely meager accessibility to basic amenities. Any group or any small or a bigger group that has suddenly become vulnerable to because of climate change, because of social factors, or because of any factors can make them come under this particular gambit and must be given an opportunity to come back in the game. Human rights issues. Well, human rights issues, again, we have a question. BRSR is very explicitly asking the companies, if you have a policy on the human rights issues, what would be constituted as human rights issues? Everything can constitute as human rights issues. But according to but some of the key issues with respect to human rights would be if there are any accidents in the premises, if there are any labor issues, if there is any exploitation happening. POSH is a human rights issue. If there is any sexual harassment that is happening at the workplace, if there is a discrimination on the basis of class, caste, creed, or dialect also is happening on in the premises, that will be constituted as a human rights issue. If there is a stakeholder that is raising any kind of an issue, that there's a discrimination that has been done against me, even though that person is not your employee, then that would be constituted as a human right issue. So whether you keep all these factors in mind while you're taking decisions with your key stakeholders. Well, as the BRSR core, this progress, the amount of progress that we have achieved in these frameworks, we have also come up with a new term of social impact assessment. Social impact assessment is a kind of an assessment, just like financial assessment, or there is any kind of an audit that happens, any due diligence. So social impact assessment is also can be termed as an impact assessment of a company with respect to the social factors. It is applicable on entities that have undertaken social impact assessment in compliance with laws such as right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation, and resettlement Act 2013. So right now, SEBI is holding its reins only unto the 2-3 factors with respect to social impact assessment. Whether whenever there is a company going out acquiring any kind of a land, if that has been done with the righteous mind and all laws and compliances have been taken into account. Okay, moving forward, BRSR also speaks about how fairly diverse and inclusive you are if you have policy on diversity and inclusion, if you conduct trainings on diversity and inclusion. Let's firstly understand very simply what diversity and inclusion would mean. Diversity and inclusion would mean simply that under no circumstances you are discriminating any person, and the only criteria of selection would be merits. So when it comes to as we spoke about marginalized groups, we spoke about specially abled, we spoke about women being sexually harassed, whether we spoke about human rights issues. All these issues can be resolved if we open our hearts and minds towards including people from different backgrounds, diverse dialects, diverse nationalities, and become a company that just does not practice any kind of discrimination on whatsoever basis. Okay, so now that we have covered E and S, the key terms that there are certain terms that are covered under the governance factors also. There are two types of indicators in the BRSR report. One is the essential indicators, and the second is the leadership indicators that are voluntary in disclosures. So the disclosures that you cannot budge from giving an information would be the essential indicators, and the leadership indicators or voluntary disclosures in a disclosure or indicators would be where if your operations are secretive in nature, or by disclosing this, your company's operations can get hampered in any manner whatsoever. For now, you can refrain from giving that information. If you give, great. But if you don't want to give, it's okay, we understand, because this framework will take some time to settle. And we have to give that much of leverage to the companies to be able to settle their operations in accordance with these principles. So what we started with is a term, value chain partners. Value chain partners, why are we not using the term supply chain partners? Even though supply chain is a more lucidly used term in economics as well as in law. But still we are using this term value chain because it slightly differentiates itself from the supply chain, is because it is adding value. And with every step, there is a value that is getting added in either in the enhancement of the product or whether in the enhancement of the service. That is why this term is getting interchanged with supply chain partners as we are progressing ahead with our social studies. Okay, until now, we have spoken about labor laws, and they have been prevalent in the society for a very long time. There are audits that happen, and labor compliances is not something that any company can budge from. But there is this term that has come into force through BRSR reporting, where SEBI is also asking, what are you doing towards employee well-being? We understand you are complying with all these statutes, but if there is anything that you are doing towards employee well-being, and that is quite a wide term. For example, if you're also taking care of of the mental health of your employees, if your employees are upskilling themselves, if your employee is having accessibility to a crèche service, if there is maternal policy, if there is a paternal policy, well, great. Paternal policy, having a maternity leave policy is a statutory mandate. But if you also give paternal leave and you give paternity benefits, then that's an added plus. And now let's understand what is assurance. Assurance, as the word suggests, it is a stamp by an expert on the qualitative, and the quantitative data of the KPIs that are mentioned in the BRSR core, because that is important. So now, as the topic suggests, revving up for the BRSR, the time has come that we start to understand what would be the right framework to do the BRSR reporting effectively? It's very simple. Firstly, we need to understand what all these jargons would be. Second step would be that we identify what all departments will be involved, because there is a lot of data that needs to be collated. But if we identify the departments, and from that particular questionnaire of BRSR, we identify which question needs to be pulled out and what data would be required from which department, then it will not be much of a challenge after that. Department mapping, after that, there will be data collation and record maintenance. Then there will be formulation of proper policies, conducting training, and an effective implementation. Well, just making policies and not letting your stakeholders know about those policies and not conducting trainings on those policies would not create an impact in spirit through which the government is trying to make through BRSR. So in order to have an effective BRSR report, a good BRSR report, we should not only just focus on making policies, we should also be conducting regular trainings and upskilling ourselves and keep evolving as the times are. Now let's understand majorly the departments that will be involved in the BRSR reporting. First one would be Human Resource Department, then the Legal Department. So some companies have Legal and Secretarial Department as one department, some have separate. So depending upon your structure, you can differentiate. Operations Department, Finance Department, and then IT Department. What Human Resource Department needs to have for the reporting in the BRSR? So all policies of the company usually are compiled by the Human Resource Department. They need to compile it and have it in their database and their system. The code of conduct, details of the trainings and programs, employee benefit schemes, grievance redressal mechanism, and the employee register. This all data will be required to be put in order by the Human Resource Department. Legal and Secretarial need to have details of all the awards and fines, penalties during the financial year of the reporting, adverse order on IP related matters, if any, standard drafts of the agreements, pending or ongoing litigations against directors, details of CSR activities and initiatives, conflict of interest related complaints and redressal mechanism. This data needs to be compiled and kept with by this department. On the Procurement and Operations Department, some of the companies have these as different departments. Some of the companies have this as a conjoined department. So depending upon your structure, but overall, this is going to be the data that needs to be collated by these two departments, and that would be sustainable sourcing policy. We've discussed this policy before. Details of the value chain partners, list of inputs and sustainably sourced outputs, sustainability certifications. All the certifications, the standards, the eco mark, or any other, the world mark, or any international accreditations. You have the gold certification or a LEED certification. These need to be collated by this particular department. Then comes the finance department. Paradoxically, all the information with respect to Principle 6 related to environment needs to be collated by the finance department. So nothing is independent of the other. Nature is dependent on economy. Economy is dependent on nature. So all the bills related to water and electricity for the calculation of scope emissions, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, have to be kept in order by the finance department of all the months. The financial statements per product turnover, because this is a question that is asked in the BRSR core in section B. Specific R&D expenditure on product sustainability. So in principle 2, there is a question that is asked whether the company invests in research and development on how this product can be made more sustainable. So if you are a company that is doing that kind of a research and development, then any expenditure related to that needs to be kept in order by the finance department. Then comes the IT department. All the IT policies, depending upon the nature of your company, the certifications, a lot of certifications are required for companies that deal in card swiping. PCDSS certificate is required. You need to have all this in order. Data breach incidents have to be put in order by the IT department. Data privacy complaints need to be kept in order by the IT department. They cannot be kept with the legal department. They should be the IT department needs to be hands-on on it. And now we have the must-have policies for your good and effective BRSR report. At least these policies should be there. Anti-corruption and anti-bribery policy, sustainable sourcing policy, waste management policy, equal opportunity policy, resource management policy. Resource management policy would be how much energy efficiency is going to be achieved by your company, setting targets, and how much water, how much energy, and how much other resources you're going to consume, and what kind of targets you're going to set for yourself. These kind of milestones should be there in your resource management policy. Basically, being mindful of your usage. Employee well-being policy, health and safety policy, grievance redressal policy, POSH policy, cyber security policy, consumer grievance redressal policy. Why do we need a consumer grievance redressal policy? So that consumers do not feel that they cannot interact with the company at the time when they're facing problem with any service or the product that they invested their resources, their time, and their trust in. I understand that a lot of stakeholders might say that we do have Consumer Protection Act for that. But why do you need to go to the court when you can resolve it outside through an effective policy and a grievance redressal mechanism? So I would like to close my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Skriti. I think the canvas of the environmental, social, and governance factors is very broad, but the various factors which are to be considered have been so lucidly explained by Skriti that I'm personally fascinated and learned a lot about it. Thank you very much, Skriti.
Thank you, sir.
And each concept factor you have explained with easy day-to-day examples. Now I request Ankit Singhi to please make his comments and his take it forward.
Thank you, Agarwal sir. And I think Sukriti has left a little space for me to speak. I think she has covered all the topics as lucidly as mentioned by you. I'll just touch upon a couple of things which are important, I think, to be brought to the notice of the our audience. Is we need to be principally clear in terms of how we would like to see BRSR. Whether we would like to see is just a mechanism to report whatever the SEBI has asked, or you want to see that as something by which you intend to achieve your goals towards sustainability and to contribute towards other factors of social and governance as outlined in the abbreviation of ESG. So if we are concerned with the with more on the reporting aspect only, I think Sukriti has very well outlined the key objects and concepts in the report, and the how you as an organization you need to prepare. But we need to just not wait at the end of the year so that we can just come and outline what we have done in the BRSR, because it asks you a lot of information on quantitative data. While a lot of quantitative data you can definitely can collate at the end of the year, but what is important is that what you want to present in the report. If you just want to present purely what has been done, or you want to present it that we would like to do this and then present it in form of the BRSR report. So this has to be understood in order to determine how you want to frame or prepare for your BRSR. Because if you see, BRSR is just asking you to report on all these aspects, whether you've done, whether you've not done. If you've not done, there is no penal consequences on you. At certain places, it has asked you, if you've not done, please explain why you've not done. So there is no penal consequences of not disclosing anything in the BRSR report. But what if puts light on the company is in terms of, if you're not disclosing on some elements in the BRSR, then it throws light upon how, in terms of how seriously and you are considering those factors where you've said that you're doing nothing or there is nothing to be disclosed. Because if you see, even under the report, there are essential indicators and the leadership indicators. So SEBI would have said that all the indicators will form part of the essential indicators. The reason why they've mentioned as a leadership indicators, that they thought that leadership indicators are something which are additional things to do, and let's not put that as an onus on companies. And if you want to show that you have done something additional, you can use those leadership indicators to highlight that what you've done additionally and apart from what you've done in the essential factors. Many companies will find it difficult even to reply to the lot of things in the essential factors if they don't prepare themselves to report in that order. So therefore, it is very important, first of all, to understand BRSR, what in terms of the principles, what information has been sought in various principles, and then you have to prepare it accordingly, just as a reporting tool, or you want to do it as a framework to achieve sustainability. If you want to do it as a framework to achieve sustainability, then you can use all the disclosures that have been asked in the BRSR report as a tool to create a framework. Okay, that on all these parameters that have been asked in the BRSR report, we would like to come with a report which is submission which is positive in nature, and that will also propel as an organization to undertake those steps in those directions. Like, for example, a very small point is like in terms of disability. So the question is this: how friendly is your organization? So many organizations don't consider that as an important factor, and more importantly, where they don't hire disabled people. But your approach towards it, that you want, even if you have not an organization which is hiring disabled friendly, how prone is for a disabled person to visit your office, access your office, meet your person? Is that possible in the current structure in which how your office is built, how facilities are provided? So all these you can very well say, we don't have any disabled employee and therefore we have no facilities for such kind of persons. But on the other way, if you think like that, okay, even if there is no such employee, but we would like to create an organization which is friendly to such people, then it shows that you are doing something additionally and you are thinking for them also. Therefore, the role of stakeholders is very important, which Sukriti highlighted, that you need to ascertain what are the key stakeholders that are there, and how you like to map each of them and try to cover on each of the factors under ESG, wherever whatever factors are concerned with those. When I was talking about framework, so it is very important. If you look, BRSR is a framework. Like internationally, there are various frameworks. So if you look towards BRSR as a framework and try to implement it, just not as a tool to report, just as a tool to achieve sustainability and to perform well in other factors, then you will slightly be more proactive in building things that are being asked in BRSR. A lot of other things on employees, on environment, on other social factors, like for example your vendors. So there, most of the companies, a lot of vendors in more upstream and downstream, and at times we don't matter how well compliant those vendors are. Are those vendors prohibiting child labor? Do they discriminate among us, the employees? Do they follow environmental friendly environmental regulated compliances while undertaking their manufacturing? So all these, you just procure a product for them and use it in your own business. I don't think the story ends there. I think as an organization which gives importance to sustainability, you also need to start building that capability or confidence in your vendors, that they also need to do their bit on those aspects also, where you also play focus more. So therefore, in case of BRSR, we have to look at it more broadly than a reporting tool, and more as a tool to implement framework, and then try to work on each and every element of the principles that are there, and try to find how well I can do in each of the principles, and even try to report on essential indicators, leadership indicators, apart from the essential indicators. Other important factor in terms of BRSR is, as of now, we don't recognize this, that post BRR, when BRSR took shape, a lot of quantitative data is there. And once the data is out, even BSc and NSCs are also now taking those data in XML form. When it is said, given in that data form, it also becomes a tool for comparison. So as an investor, if I want to invest in a different set of companies in same industry, I can use the BRSR report as a tool to ascertain how well they are doing in terms of all their factors, E, S, and G, and can compare their BRSR across to see if which companies, for example, doing good on HR parameters, to what extent companies are forcing their vendors, value chain supply partners, to be compliant in law, to be sustainable in their own sourcing, and various other factors. And all these will form an important element for any decision making if I'm investing in industries forming same set of same sector. So therefore, it is also important that what we are reporting in BRSR is not just something which is there to read, but lot of factors, including decision making on investing side, will also trigger from those things. Even prospective candidates, your employees, prospective employees might see and go see in BRSR, and so see what kind of measures you're trying to take towards human resource, what is your retention rate, what is your turnover rate. All these things are now open in public, and they will be able to make a decision as to how well you are an organization as compared to other organizations if you start comparing BRSR. So from that perspective also, it is very important to understand the importance of BRSR. Another point is that Sukriti mentioned about mapping of departments. I think that is the fundamental need, because a lot of data is required under the BRSR. So if we are not able to map the current departments as to whatever data is required from which department, and ensure that they prepare those data during the course of the year, so that it is easier for the company at the end of the year to prepare the report. Because we have seen at times that companies don't have that data, and then they rushed at the end of the year to arrange that data. So that challenge can also be overcome by mapping the department, mapping the data that is required from each department, and then planning across it how this data will be arranged throughout the year, so that at the end BRSR report can be prepared. So these are some of the points that I would like to make to the audience. And I think now we can move to the Q&A if there are some. I think a lot of questions are there on the chat.
Thank you very much, Ankit. And very rightly observed by Ankit. Is it mere compliance? Is it mere reporting? Or is it something to achieve sustainable goals? Is it to create long-term value creation? Or is it risk mitigation? So thank you very much, Ankit, very nicely. And the data challenges, you rightly said that you must identify the departments and which data is to be supplied with which department. And once the departments are mapped, it's easy to collate the data and do the reporting. Without wasting any further time, there are lots of questions which are pouring in. Ankit, would BRSR reporting be applicable the financial year 23-24 if the company was listed on November 29th, 23, but falls within the top 1,000 companies as on March 31, 24?
Sir, I think it will be applicable for them to prepare BRSR report for the annual report that they will be preparing for the financial year 23-24.
Skruti, is this core assurance format applicable to NBFC companies also?
Sir, if they are lying within top 1,000 listed
Yes,
entities,
they are lying within the top 1,000.
so it will be applicable. It's only the only criteria is market capitalization, not the industry nature.
Now, in the context of NBCC, does the term value chain refer to cumulative borrowing or lending to any company constituting 75% of total borrowing or lending of the NBFC as on 31st March?
Sir, I think in case of NBFC, we have to look this in a different set. I don't think by value chain partners, the objective is in case of NBFC to cover the banks and the customers. So it has to be looked in a different perspective from the other vendors from which they are sourcing their products. Sorry, whatever thing they would be sourcing in terms of their vendors. I don't think it will cover the banks.
There is also a similar type of question. What can an entity engaged in financial services do additionally on environment verticals of ESG?
Sukriti, you would like to take this?
So can you please repeat the question?
What can an entity engaged in financial services do additionally in environment vertical of ESG?
Honestly, I'm not able to understand what this
I think
question is
the
about.
question, I think she would like to, she would like to understand that being a service-oriented industry, how would I take more steps towards contributing to the environment?
So would it be the personal steps or
as an organization?
As an organization. As an organization.
Okay. One thing that I always tell service industries is that do not think that you don't have any emissions. Most of the time, service sector thinks that they are not doing scope 1 or scope 2 emissions, but the scope 3 emissions are the highest. And doing scope analysis, doing your internal energy analysis, they will be surprised with the results, with the energy intensity and consumption once the calculations happen. So I think the first step would be to do scope 3 analysis first, because scope 1 and scope 2, they will not be able to encompass. Scope 3 analysis first, emission analysis, and the calculation of their energy intensity and consumption.
Right. Now, require explanation.
Yes, I'll explain in very short. So scope 3 emissions are indirect emissions. Whenever a person, scope 1 emissions would be when I'm operating as a factory, the emissions that I'm doing, they will be scope 1. To run my entity, the energy that I'm consuming and emissions that I'm doing, that would be scope 2. And in order to come to my office or entity daily, I am using and consuming some fuel. That would be scope 3. So in the service sector, the travel is very high. The travel of the consultants or people working in that particular setup, the travel is seen to be very high, and that would amount to scope 3. And that is done per unit head. That is with respect to how many employees are there. So there is a whole lot of calculation that needs to be done that cannot be explained in this webinar. But surely I would like to take a one-on-one consulting session with the gentleman who has asked me this question.
Explain BRSR core KPIs.
I think, sir, there are a lot of KPIs in BRSR core. I don't think it would be possible to
Yes.
cover all of them. I think many. Sukriti, can you take some key KPIs if you want?
Yes. I would like to take the KPIs that are added. And the KPIs that are added are enabling gender diversity in business. And the other one is enhancing employee well-being and safety. So they come under the social factors. Enabling gender diversity in business, we had the disclosure on the POSH policy, whether you have it or not. It's also a statutory policy, but BRSR also asks for it. But now this particular KPI is also asking how concentrated and how dilute you are as a business. Just disclose that. How much business you are, because there are so many businesses that are comfortable with some of the vendors from past 30 years, they're doing business with them only. But there are so many MSMEs, so many startups that are coming up with great ideas. So the government just wants to know if you're giving chance, if you're ready to break the status quo, or you are just comfortable in maintaining the kind of status that you've been maintaining for so many years. So we see there's a tectonic shift that is happening in the economic practices. And this shift is taking us towards the ethical and best practices. That's what the disclosure is all about.
Although you explained it, still there is a question, further elaboration on value chain concept.
Okay. So is there a particular question or there is an explanation?
No,
required?
they want you to explain this concept again.
Okay. So, sir, as I said that this is getting replaced by the term supply chain. So value chain would encompass the full range of organizations upstream and downstream activities that convert input into output by adding value. This is the definition given by the Harvard School of Business, because from there only this term has originated. This also includes entities with which the organization has a direct or indirect business relationship and which either supply products or services that contribute to the organization's own products or services, or receive products or services from the organization. This is the definition that there is. However, if you want an explanation, this can be simply explained in a manner that your operations coming from sourcing to the customer, and after the customer, when it goes to the ambient environment, the entire behavior and the value that product is adding, that entire chain would be seen as a value chain, not just supply chain.
Next is not a question, but a compliment for you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
How to align BRSR with GRI?
I think, sir, both are different set of reporting frameworks. BRSR do take a lot of its disclosure elements from GRI. So I don't think there is any need to align. Yes, a lot of questions that you will be answering in GRI would also form part of BRSR. So to that extent, you can avoid the duplication if you're preparing both the framework, reporting under both the frameworks.
What is BRSR Lite?
BRSR Lite was, I think it was the committee that suggested BRSR. It also suggested a format for unlisted companies, and I think it termed it as a BRSR Lite, which is yet to see the light of the day. I think ministry has yet not taken decision on to mandating disclosure similar to BRSR in form of BRSR Lite by unlisted entities. So as of now, it's just there in the report.
On voluntary basis, they can.
Still, companies are even not doing it voluntarily because many companies even don't know that there is such a report called BRSR Lite.
How many formats of BRSR are there?
There is only one format of BRSR that includes the additional KPIs of BRSR Core. So there is no more than one format of BRSR.
Ankit, there is a query for you. Why is there no liability on BRSR?
So as of now, per se, because this is just a disclosure. It's not a mandate for you to undertake these actions. For example, under certain law, and for example, environment law, you are supposed to do certain kind of emissions. If you do beyond that emission, you would be contemplating a violation. Then always definitely you would be violating that particular law. But the BRSR report is just a collation of all the set of things that you're doing on various parameters. So it just disclosure as of now whether you're doing or not, because SEBI doesn't mandate you to do those things that they are asking you to disclose in the BRSR report. So therefore, there cannot be a penalty if you're not doing one thing or other.
Next question is, what is BRS Core and how is it different from BRSR?
Sukriti, you would like to take this?
Yes. Okay, so BRSR core notification, the very first line of that notification states that BRSR core is a subset of BRSR.
Correct.
So there is no difference. There are just two KPIs that are added and certain indicators that they were voluntary. Now they've become mandatory, and they have given an assurance approach in the BRSR core. They've given calculations in the BRSR core for the assurance. That is the primary difference.
So I think, sir, in very brief, in very simple terms, BRSR core is only there for the purpose of obtaining assurance on the elements that are required to be disclosed there. All these elements are form part of BRSR. If you are required to obtain assurance, then the assurer, while doing so, will assure that as separate element in a separate report. Those elements will be assured therein, and you can say that as a BRSR core.
Ankit, who are the experts who provide this core assurance report?
So it can be anybody having worked in the areas and expertise. It can be a chartered accountant. It can be company secretary also. It can be an environment expert, environment consultant. Anybody who has that kind of expertise. For example, in case of emission. So anybody cannot do emission just calculation. So there are labs, organizations which do the calculation of those emissions. So if you have to assure, you have to obtain those third-party reports. So as of now, the circular issued by SEBI doesn't outlines any eligibility for doing the assurance. It only says that it has to be an independent organization.
So even a secretarial auditor, a chartered accountant, or your statutory auditor can undertake this?
Yes.
If he is capable.
Yes, they can. If they have their systems and processes in place, then they can.
They can do that. Again, Skruti, how to determine value chain partner?
How to determine value? Sir, usually, okay, so value chain partners are one of the key stakeholders, and key stakeholder mapping usually is done by the company itself, sometimes through introspection, or whenever an ESG consultant is appointed, they conduct a materiality assessment through which we are able to identify who will be the key stakeholders and who will be the key value chain partners. Anybody who is doing an upstream, providing you services from upstream, will be your upstream value chain partner. And when the product has gone to the customer and has started going downstream, then they are your downstream value chain partners.
Right. What is the difference between reasonable assurance and limited assurance?
I think, sir, it is more about assurance methodology. So those who do assurance understand that what is reasonable and what is limited.
Next is just a comment that instead of a voluminous report, would it not be more meaningful if the gist of the summary of the impact of the organization under various heads, this would have sufficed. So, what is materiality assessment?
So materiality assessment is a way to identify what are the material factors that are impacting the company and the company is impacting them. Certain factors in the ESG aspects, either company is getting affected by these or companies causing an impact on these factors. So it's a detailed questionnaire and it takes a lot of effort and time to identify these factors. There are certain, there are a lot of ways to do it. There is no set formula of conducting a materiality assessment as such. People take instinctive decisions. People do it through self-developed methodologies also. But on an average, this is a method that identifies certain kind of, that analyzes the material factors for the company and the material factors the company is causing an impact on.
Ankit, what is the scope of ESG investments in India in future?
So there are already a lot of mutual funds which have ESG themes based funds. There are a lot of investment houses which do investment based on ESG themes. There are global sustainability indices where companies, they try to include companies who are doing good on ESG. That forms a basis for investing in those companies. So there is already a lot of investing which is taking place on the ESG factor only.
Somebody is asking, can you suggest name of firms which provide assurance certificate?
I think it will be difficult to take any names as of now.
Will partnerships with NGPs add value in BRSR reporting disclosures?
NGPs.
NGP is what?
I think question is not clear. Partnership with NGPs.
NGO. I think they mean NGOs.
It might help in on CSR and some other aspects which requires disclosure under BRSR.
Again, a basic question, Ankit, you can reply that. Which companies have to disclose BRSR report?
I think top 1,000 companies by market capitalization as on the immediate preceding financial year after the end of the year.
How to calculate GHG emissions for value chain partners? That's a very technical question.
I can, in brief, I can just
quick reply. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, because this involves so much of calculation that I would require a board and all those things. So greenhouse gas emissions firstly need to be calculated for the entity on not standalone basis, but on a whole holistic basis. And for value chain partners, the first step would be to sensitize them that this kind of a mandate has already come. Then developing a framework, identifying them, developing a framework, that would be more helpful.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, are there any standards for assurance?
Sir, I'll take that up or you're taking it up?
Okay.
So, okay, in the absence of Indian standards on assurance, we do have certain recommendations by ICAI SSAF 3000 that talks about who can conduct assurance on sustainability factors. That is also called Standard on Sustainability Assurance Engagements. This particular assurance was also taken into account by RBI in July 2023 FAQs that they came out with. So, but this is not so far an Indian stamped assurance as such. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, that we are moving towards comparability. So this is an international framework of assurance that most of the companies who are doing mandatory, countries who are doing mandatory assurance are taken into account.
Is there any framework for sustainable sourcing? You explained sustainable sourcing. So is there any prescribed framework for that?
No, sir. There is no prescribed framework for sustainable sourcing right now. The only question that we need to address right now, do we have a policy on sustainable sourcing? Are we aware who are the value chain is playing a crucial role here, especially the upstream, that whoever our vendors are, whoever our contract manufacturers are, so are they licensed? Are they having their compliances in place? This is something that we need to check within our own selves. We need to have a policy, and it needs to be bespoke. The company needs to make it on its own after the identification of the value chain.
Another question is how BRSR and ESG are linked.
I think, sir, BRSR in a sense tries to cover all the factors of ESG in the 9 principles that have been outlined. So ESG is a word very broader term. BRSR tries to bring in the ESG initiatives or ESG related actions of a company in form of a reporting structure.
Ankit, whether data in BRSR have to be provided on a consolidated basis?
Sir, it can be either. The report asks you to outline whether you are preparing the report on the basis of consolidated data or on standalone. So whatever the metrics you are using, you have to disclose it in the report and then accordingly prepare it.
And what kind of review system companies can put in place for BRSR?
So it will depend upon if they've set there any goals or milestones. So if there are goals or milestones that are there, then they need to complete continuously on quarterly, half-yearly basis, review the initiatives that they want to do on the various parameters and accordingly either set up a committee or some kind of a team who will continuously review the performance against those parameters and will update the board.
Our office is in a leased premises. How to report about it being disabled friendly?
I'll take this up.
Please.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So not just about disability friendly. This question could arise in the principal 6 factors also. When it comes to calculation of GHG, whether energy consumption, because everything is on shares. And especially this problem arises in co-sharing basis, when the offices are in co-sharing spaces. And if it's on leased premises, then you need to you need to be assured at the time of reporting, especially, that whether your premises, the landowners, whoever is holding that particular land or that particular building is disability friendly or is having all those factors in place. Whether your office is in that building or not, then you have to make disclosures on those bases.
what is carbon capture in BRSR course approach guidelines?
So carbon capture is a process of capturing carbon, especially from industries and companies and entities that are doing scope 1 emissions. And it is captured in a manner, this is a scientific process, highly technical process of capturing carbon in a manner that it stays like a commodity at one place and is not released into the ambient environment. That is carbon capture. Most of the waste to energy plants do it.
Now, is it necessary to get emission figures certified by any external agency?
Not necessary. If you're doing it, I think you have to outline it in the BRSR report.
Right. Sukriti, how to determine the life cycle of a product?
Okay, sir, when I was explaining the LCA, I think the 3 points with respect to life cycle assessment that I would further like to explain, apart from how technically they are, the sample is sent to an accredited laboratory, then certain tests are conducted against the standards and specifications that are given by the Bureau of Indian Standards. But more importantly, we need to identify whether we are doing life cycle assessment on either of the stages. There are 3 types of life cycle assessments. One is cradle to grave, one is cradle to cradle, and the third one is cradle to gate. So cradle to grave would be the product gets manufactured, and after its use, it goes into the ambient environment and does certain things, whether it gets biodegraded or whether it doesn't get biodegraded, or whatever its behavior is when it's released in the ambient environment after the intended use is over. Cradle to gate would be when a product is sourced, it is right after sourcing, it is taken to a processing facility. And after that, the company, when it releases that particular product into the environment, it shrugs off its responsibility after it has gone into the market for sale and purchase. The third is cradle to cradle. Cradle to cradle study is when a product gets manufactured, how it can, before going into the ambient environment, how many time it can get into the recycling stream. That's what we call circular economy. For example, out of 8 types of plastics, PET, the plastic bottles that we see, in which we see Coca-Cola and Limca and Thumbs Up, this is the highly recyclable type of plastic, PET. HDPE and LDPE also can be recycled for 2 lifetimes, but PET can be recycled for up to 5 to 6 lifetimes. So how many lives a product can live, that is cradle to cradle, and the other 2 as I explained.
In principle 3, there is a mention of transition assistance programs. What are these programs and why are they important?
Okay, yes. So principle 3 is talking about how a company is behaving with its employees and how well inclusive we are when it comes to employee well-being. Right now, a person who is applying to my company, to any company, is not an employee, but is coming, for example, is coming with certain set of discipline. For example, if that person has served for a short time in the Navy or the Indian forces, but is making a transition into the corporate world, how inclusive and how open my approach would be to assisting that individual into this career. Or there is a mother who took a career break for 5 to 6 years till the time her toddler was growing into a full-fledged human being, and then wants to come back into the game. And how open I am to including her into the mainstream, that would be transition assistance program. That shows my inclusive and diverse mindset towards including any kind of talent.
You mentioned in your presentation a number of policies. Now, whatever you mentioned, is it enough or more policies need to be added?
These policies are good enough to show a BRSR report. If you want to do a reporting, then these are okay. But if you want to, since you've come into the top 1,000 game, why not climb another ladder? So we do have, there is no end to being good, and there are definitely more than this. This is just a ballpark number according to the BRSR report. But as Tata Steel has outnumbered everybody in their BRSR report, in which they have incorporated so many policies and they regularly conduct trainings. There can be n number of policies like environmental policy, energy policy, document retention and archival policy, HIV/AIDS policy, moonlighting policy. You can have so many policies that can enhance your ESG factors and matrices.
Good. I think we have run through most of the questions. If any questions remain unanswered, they can write to us, and we assure you that we'll reply each and every question. Now, before we close, a quick roundup. Ankit, 1 minute roundup we do every webinar.
What to say on? I think it's an exciting place for both professionals and companies. And as I mentioned, it will depend how you see it. If you see it as a reporting tool, or you see it as a way to achieve your goals towards sustainability and contributing towards society in general, and that will define how your approach will be towards BRSR. And I think in times to come, assurance will definitely be more broad based. It will also extend to a lot of other companies in the top 1,000 category of market capitalization. And challenging element would be to definitely identify value chain partners, and then to also assure that they also do their bit towards their contribution to the factors outlined in the ESG. I think that is the space where a lot of work needs to be done in days to come.
Skruti, your take.
Sir, it's Sukruti.
So thank you, sir. I completely resonate with Ankit, sir. And in addition to what he said, I also feel that a lot of companies get intimidated when they see all these jargons. And they want to, and when we don't understand something, we try to ignore it, or we try to put it on the back burner. Okay, we'll see. Okay, I don't want to get into it. But I can assure you, once you start this journey on regular basis, sustainability in itself is not just related to environment. It is a very commonsensical approach towards running your business and making a mark. And it is not an act of charity, or it is very different from CSR. It is like cleaning your own home, as I always say. And at the same time, this is inclusive. This is quite a fun journey, and we all should have a more inquisitive mind towards learning about it as much as we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ankit and Sukriti. I think
you,
it's a very seemingly intricate and complex subject you explained in such simple terms that it looks very easy. I think, as rightly said, a beginning has to be made. The right systems of collecting data have to be you have to identify the various departments and which department has to supply which data. Advanced planning has to be done. And if this is done, then reporting becomes much easier. And the message is very loud and clear. It is not just mere compliance, but this is about the long-term value creation for the company. This is risk mitigation. And if you want to sustain, you have to behave responsibly. Before I close, friends, our journey of knowledge sharing will continue. And we have chosen a very interesting topic for our next webinar on 16th of February. That is optimizing employee engagement through aligning appraisals and ESOPs. Now, this is a time, month of February and March, when we do the annual appraisals and rewarding the employees for the work done by them during the year. Now, whether these appraisals, these rewards can be through grant of ESOPs will be an interesting topic. So we look forward to your attendance in large numbers. Thank you very much, all of you. And thank you very much once again, Ankit and Skruti. Thank you all.